Everyone, and welcome to the Alpha 8 podcast. I'm your host, Hermann Binek, and the co-founder of Alpha 8. We will discuss everything from emergency response initiatives to the intense battle against wildlife crimes. We will even get you into the thrilling chases of hunting down poachers with guns and so much more. So join me in these conversations where every story highlights the sheer determination and bravery of those making a real difference, those people on the ground. When lives are on the line, every second counts and every action matters. So, grab a seat, get comfy, and become a part of our mission.
In today's episode, we wanted to go over emergency preparedness because, currently it is the beginning of summer, but it feels like we've been in summer for many months now. It is hot depending on where you are. I know globally as well as domestically, we all have the challenges of, wildfires or power outages. I know in Texas there's hurricanes happening right now. So I thought it would be really nice to sit down and kind of go through what emergency preparedness really looks like. There's a statistic I came across that said 48% of Americans don't have emergency supplies. So, speaking to somebody who is a professional EMT who has training in situations like this, what should we be including in our emergency kits? Like, what are things that we need to consider if we are caught in a situation that would be deemed an emergency?
Statistic is interesting because I think a lot of the Americans just rely on our EMS system, emergency medical service. So something happens, I slip and fall in the garage, I just lay there, call 911, and within 5 minutes, professionals are there who are happy and friendly and everything works out perfectly, and they drag you to the next hospital where everything and everybody is taking care of you. And that is the ideal situation. However, nowadays you barely have the ideal situation. If something happens, if there is a big disaster, if there is a hurricane, a fire, earthquake or something, then you may lay there in that garage for 2 days because there's a power outage. Nobody really knows what's going on, and sometimes you really have to help yourself, right? And that's why I think you also need preparedness kits, first aid kits, emergency kits, different kits for different situations. Everybody should prepare for certain eventualities, and that's why you have a first aid kit in your car. A first aid kit in your car should be different to the preparedness kit you have in your house when you live close to I don't know, hurricane area, earthquake area, or wildlife area or something, wildlife fire area. So I think also kits are different.
I never even thought about having an emergency kit in my car, but it makes a whole lot of sense.
Emergency kit in your car is if you have an accident, you need to help yourself, or you get to an accident, right? So the first thing is you got to get out of your car. It's maybe not bright sunlight, it's maybe at night. So the first thing which should be in your kit is like a reflective vest or something, which you make sure that you are safe when you run around your car or a accident car, right? So your safety first. There are some reflective vests which you can buy for just a couple of bucks. That's the first thing. And then how do I help that person? Then there should be, besides having gloves, because you don't want to touch somebody who is soaked in blood, for example, right? You have emergency gloves. Then you have some bigger gauzes and bandages and stretch bandages to basically make a pressure bandage or so-called Israeli bandage so you can stop a bleeding, right? Maybe even a tourniquet so you can stop hemorrhaging, bleeding, a bunch of band-aids, stuff like that, like essential stuff, because you will call 911 and those people in US, they will be there in the next 10, 15 minutes, right? And then they take care of it. This is just for the first emergency situations. Also, what would be good is to have like a little mnemonic list or something what you have to do. Everybody has probably learned that you have the ABC or ABCD, right? Or there are other acronyms like sample or something, or the X ABCD. This is what you should maybe have in your emergency bag, because you are under stress, and you can just take that little board or that little list and say, okay, what do I have to do? ABC. It's basically airway, breathing, circulation, right? We in the emergency department, we do X, ABC. X is exsanguination, if you bleed out, and then ABC. So you basically have to treat first what kills you first, and then you go from there. You call 911, you explain everything. There's another mnemonic. You have those 7W questions, right? Which actually, if you go through every question, it calms you down. That's also very good. Then you have done a great job as a first responder.
Will you go through the 7 W's for people who don't know what those are?
So usually calling in an emergency or for an emergency, you have 7W questions, and it's basically, who are you? So your first name, your last name, or your company or whatever. Then where is the scene of the accident or the emergency, right? And then what has happened, number 3. So what form of effects? Somebody drowned, somebody fell, a car accident, T-bone, blah, 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 blah. Who is involved? It's a tour bus with 25 people and a motorcycle guy. So that guy on the other side, the dispatcher, can actually then get all the knots together and dispatch 1, 2, 3, or 4 different cars. Then what support do you require? What do you actually need? Because there are people who call 911 and 5 other people watch that same accident and call 911 as well. So what do I need? I need an ambulance. I need this. I need that. I don't know what to do. I'm here right now to speak to them. And then what are your contact details? Meaning, like, where are you? Are you at the scene as well? Are you at a car park on the other side of the street, or are you from a rooftop looking at that boat sinking from 500 yards away? So where are you in reference to everything? And then number 7 is always WAIT, wait. Wait until that guy asks you a question. So wait for further inquiries, right? Because a couple of people, and I've been on a dispatcher side on those calls as well, where they tell me, I'm Mr. Here, there, and there, and this, and this, and this, and that happened, bam, and hung up. And shit, now we gotta record, turn back the tape and see what we have missed. 7th question is, wait, do you have any questions for me? Okay, can I hang up? Okay, fine, thank you. That guy will tell you somebody is coming, do this, do that, and the one and the fourth. So 7W questions. Who, where, what, who is involved, what support do you need, what contact, and wait.
It's probably easier for somebody who's trained in the medical profession to stay calm in emergency situations. I love the idea of having the acronyms to fall back on, where if we're stressed out, we can pull this piece of paper out and we don't have to think, we just have to read. But do you have another tip or insight into how to calm the person who has to act in the emergency down?
You also have from flight crews, they have basically crew resource management, CRM, where if you are not alone, you can talk to each other. What are we doing? Are we sure we're doing that? So teamwork is always good and always calms you down, because you can be sure that you're doing the right thing, because my partner said the same thing. Fine, good. If you're all alone, and I tell the guys we teach all the time, whether I'm an EMT or I'm paramedic or nurse or whatever kind of level we are, you're always at a stressful point where you try to not miss anything, right? So I'm telling everybody, and everybody should realize that treat first what kills you first. That's what it is. If that guy is laying on the floor and screaming, then I don't have to do airway because that guy is screaming. There is a lot of air in his airway, right? He's maybe screaming because of something fallen on his crown or whatever, something or something. So you look at it and see with your own eyes, oh, this is what I have to do first. Perfect. So you treat first what can kill him first, and then you do all the same thing. And then you go back to your acronyms, to your, oh yeah, what's in my first aid kit? I maybe have, glued it on the top, A, B, C, D, E. Like, oh, okay, then you start all over again. You call 911. That's basically what everybody does. If you are a doctor or just a first responder, the doctor then can give any kind of medication and stabilize more than just the first responder, but the first responder can help as well.
A first responder or somebody who maybe not even involved in the incident, even like a passerby, if you have these supplies or this information in your vehicle and you see something that you can, see something, say something, do something, you can assist in that situation. So we went over what to include in an emergency kit in a vehicle. What are some things that are important to have on hand at home?
It depends on where you live, right? Usually at home is whatever can happen at home. You can get burned in the kitchen, you have cuts in the kitchen, right? You can fall up and down stairs, you can whatever hurt yourself with all kinds of things, right? So this is where you should have medications for those things. Very important, band-aids and steri strips for like sharp cuts in the kitchen, something to stop a bleeding, right? That means some kind of gauze with some bandage where you can put pressure on it, or Israeli bandage. In worst case scenario, if you do some kind of home work with like, I don't know, electric saws or something, have tourniquets or something like that, depending on what you do, what your surrounding. Some kind of kits which you can use for your either for your first aid or that you do not have to go to a doctor or to an emergency room, right? If you get burnt or something, you have some burnt cream or whatever. It's also you have certain kind of antibiotics or antivirals at home. Maybe then I know when I'm getting sick, I'm taking whatever Tylenol and something to bring the fever down. Then I don't have to go to a doctor. So whatever you may experience at home, there are certain things which you can take before you go to the next step and call an ambulance or something.
I'm sure you've come across like those pre-created emergency kits that they sell that you just like a grab and go. So I'm wondering, is there anything in there that you've opened that you're like, this is ridiculous to even have in there, but it's always included. But what's the most useless thing in an emergency kit that you found?
Things you really don't need in an emergency kit is, and you see that sometimes, like some irrelevant gadgets where you have like two pair of scissors and two tweezers, and then another knife and a thermometer in a first aid kit. I'm not giving somebody a thermometer rectally if I'm in a car accident or something, right? Or some ice packs, or like a real sometimes too much medications, right? For all kinds of issues. And the nicest one I always see is you have some um, you have some cream, like anti-itching cream or something, which it's not really an emergency there. Like, yeah. And it once that what I said before is it always depends what you need that first aid kit for, right? A lot of people buy a first aid kit and just have it everywhere when they go hiking, in the car, at home, and traveling. Not good.
I'm going to disagree with you. Anti-itch cream is very important. I got mosquito bites everywhere, and the anti-itch cream is like that is the number one thing I'm grabbing in an emergency kit. Um, but
You should have insect repellent.
I had that too, but then if it doesn't work, then you have a backup. So I think it's important to have a backup to some things too.
Right?
But it is a crazy statistic that 48% of Americans lack the emergency supplies. Like, why do you think, in regards to being prepared? I know you touched on it in the beginning where people think like, if something happens, they call 911 or they rely on other people to kind of help them out of certain situations. Um, I know you do a lot of training with your team overseas in like the Philippines and Namibia. What are some of do you teach them these same skills that kind of translate globally?
Yes, we do. Here in US, everybody is pampered. It's the same like in Western Europe. I call 911 and somebody shows up. And it's a very trained, relaxed, and experienced person, and I don't have to take care of anything else. They take care of me. As I said, if there's any kind of disaster from hurricane to wildfire or whatever, this can change very fast. And then you maybe wait 1 or 2 hours or 3 hours, or you maybe have to wait a day until somebody comes. Then it can go really downhill with your emergency, right? And now imagine that in third world countries where you don't have that level, where there's if you are in the Philippines, for example, as a tourist and you call 911, probably somebody will show up in the first half hour or hour, but then who is showing up? Then there is some kind of first responder who does not know anything about the ABC or the sample acronym or what to do, doesn't even speak the language. So that's why we are in those countries to help those people to get better medical care and get better medical training, because we always try to be multipliers. If I train those 5 people in the ambulance car, they tell all their colleagues and show them the tricks we told them, and then it goes forward, and then we multiply everything. And if you are then going there as a traveling tourist and have some kind of an accident, car accident or something, then you maybe reach a crew which also has been trained or had further training from Alpha A, which then actually help better, and then you have much better chances of survival and reliability.
That's a really good point in regards to if you're traveling, maybe you speak the language, maybe you don't speak the language. Is there any insight for like travel first aid kits or, what to do in emergency situation when you're not in your home space?
I would pack in a travel first aid kit special medications which I need to survive when I'm in trouble, because I maybe don't get Tylenol or whatever, which I usually take if I have a headache or whatever. Um, Antidiarrheal medication, antiviral medication. Then you have malaria prophylaxis for certain areas, right? So it's Malarones and all that stuff. Um, and on the Alpha 8 channel, there's actually a video about what to take and what not to take against malaria. But in a travel kit, try to specialize it for where I'm actually traveling and make a little bit of a research of what do I get in that country, right? Even if I'm going um, to France and look at the Eiffel Tower, say if you go to a pharmacy, they probably don't really know what you mean by Tylenol, right? So they know the a different brand name or something, and then you maybe something you get only in certain doses, a higher doses or lower doses or whatever, something, certain medications you cannot get at all without a prescription. So I would research that. I also would research where the best hospital is, and all that in between I would take with me. Um, Definitely band-aids, steri strips, and big gauzes and bandages, and maybe even a tourniquet if something bad happens, right? So you can actually survive.
This is from the CDC website, that 20% of Americans get their emergency information from like various mobile apps or, online news. What advice would you give somebody if they are in an emergency situation and they don't have access to cell service, or, they're in the woods or the mountains where they can't call 911, they can't call an emergency response team?
depending on where you travel again, right? If I'm hiking up a mountain and I'm preparing a hiking tour where I don't have or barely have cell phone service, you pack accordingly to 2 days. But then you probably go to that country, to that town, and to that hotel or bed and breakfast, and then you prepare your route, and then you're gonna go there to climb that mountain overnight, right? Um, you tell the concierge or that bed and breakfast of what you have in mind, what you're gonna do when you leave. We are leaving tomorrow at 5 a.m. Nobody will be up. That's where we'll be leaving. We are leaving to that northeastern hiking peak. That should take about 5 hours, blah, blah, blah. There is no cell phone service. If we do not check in with you by the time of da, 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 can you please call 911 and rescue services? Leave a lot of time. So if you are in trouble and I don't know, you have a cougar attack or avalanche or whatever, something, and you are bashed up and you cannot move, then you really have to wait a couple of hours, right? Because you have to give a couple of hours leverage until that bed and breakfast or concierge at the hotel lobby says they have not checked in, I need to call the police, right? So that time where you leave you're left out there alone and wait with a banged up knee or whatever, dislocated shoulder or something. This is where you pack accordingly. You have a couple of more snacks, you have a little bit of liquid, and most importantly, exposure. You're getting cold. You need some blankets. You have those emergency blankets, it looks like you're going on the moon, and or like real nice jackets or something like that. Maybe a tourniquet and bandages, bandages, bandages.
That's really a good advice because I think, so often do we think of emergency preparedness kits to be for emergencies when something happens or unexpected events occur, like a natural disaster or a fire or things like that. But it could be being active, like going out, out hiking or rock climbing or doing, boating sports, things like that, where yes, it's an emergency, but it's also not an anticipated event. Which brings me to the other statistic that 29% of Americans have an emergency plan, which means that 71% of Americans do not have an emergency plan. Why do you think that is? Like there's, all sorts of things happen and we've seen it in the news. We've seen it. I'm sure everybody's experienced some sort of emergency at one point in their life. But what do you think the issue is with creating a plan?
I want to see those 30% and what type of plan that is. I'm pretty sure most of them really suck because there is two different things which a lot of people don't understand. They are having their emergency kits or some things, or somebody is a real prepper or whatever, right? I have 10,000 ammunition when before the world goes down because um, the zombies apocalypse arrives. Whatever. They are getting really prepared for everything. An emergency plan, an emergency kit is preparedness. Preparedness doesn't help you. You need readiness as well. And there are two different things. Readiness is you have to actually train that. You have to bring that plan you have to life, or actually use it once to realize, oh, yeah, that actually could work, or that works well, or this is complete nonsense. That needs to be redone. You also need readiness, not only preparedness. Preparedness alone doesn't help you at all. You also need to be ready to do something. You need to have that certain type of awareness. You need to have um, um, that overall system in place that you are actually ready to do something. Can you do it? You cannot have an emergency plan where you say, like, well, then I take the helicopter and fly away. You can fly the helicopter, nobody. Very bad plan, no readiness. You need to have that certain kind of self-awareness of certain situations. And even if you are live at home, you need a certain kind of self-awareness. What's coming? And maybe start looking at the news. I'm ready to follow suit of whatever somebody says.
Do you have any personal stories that you can share from your experience with Alpha Aid and being in the field that really highlights the importance of being prepared?
Well, we had situations where we were part of a traveling group, for example, and it was really out in the nowhere in Africa, but we gave them a briefing, preparedness and readiness briefing, right? And when they called us as a 911 call and we were already deployed, that person told me, hey, and I looked at the ABC and everything was fine, and I did this and I did that and I did that. And the one guy was really banged up with a very bad leg injury, with like squirting blood and everything. And he said, and I put a tourniquet on it. Um, and the best thing he said, did I do everything correct? What should I do? And we said, when did you put the tourniquet on? Can you put a time on? How hard is it? Is it had it stopped the bleeding? Can you maybe loosen it? Otherwise, he loses the leg right away. And he said, oh, I wrote everything down because I thought that you guys are on my ass by asking me all those questions before. So um, he was more ready to be questioned by me again than just taking care of the situation. But that was good. He was like, oh my God, I got to do everything correct, or they're going to bash me on the head with it. That was very good. And that's why he was prepared and he was ready. And that was a good thing. He had that readiness to do certain things. Like, I'm prepared, I'm ready to whatever you say. That was a very good situation. And we had situations where we were in Africa, close to the Zambezi River, and we talked to local rescue team, right? A traveling group is coming. They're not the best travelers. Something can happen. Can you have certain things ready? Um, and they actually did. Somebody fell down a ravine, and we told those guys, everything we told you to have ready, do you have set? Oh yes, we have climbing gear, blah blah blah, rope, and so on and so forth. And like, okay, can you make everything ready? I'll be there in about 15 minutes. And then everything worked. And then you have a very nice so-called rescue chain where you don't lose time. So when we arrived, we jumped into our rescue gear and could rappel down right away, help that person, which was just banged up but didn't have life-threatening injuries. So that was perfect. Just because we gave that preparedness and readiness briefing 5 times in the last 5 days to those local guys. And that's what you need. And that's where we also started with Alpha 8, because in certain countries, you go into an ambulance call to a rescue team or something, and you see a horror scenario. There's literally nothing there, or there's a rope which is like 60 or 70 years old, which they don't even have anymore, right? You could put that in a museum or something where expiration date is overdue by 20 years, something like that, where if something happens to me or to any kind of traveler, they're really in a bad situation.
That leads me to another question of how often you should be checking your emergency kit. Like, how often should you check supplies and like refresh them? Because, like you said, you don't want to have items that we're putting in a museum.
I would say every once in a while, let's do like every couple of years a little first aid trainings course. If it is online or whatever, just do that. Because by doing that course, you're going through the items in an emergency kit, and then you're bound to go downstairs or upstairs and look at your kit. And then you see, oh man, half of it is expired. I think the most important thing is that you know what you do. You have that readiness of, okay, I know how to stop a bleeding. Now, everybody who would listen, do you know how to stop a bleeding? If not, go and take a course, look it up. You can even ask us. I'm happy to show anybody without any charge, of course. Just make it happen.
Just having a few skills in their toolbox when unexpected situations occur, they can navigate a tragic event or an emergency is huge because it really could be the difference between life or death. What's the single most important piece of advice that you want to give to people that is crucial when it comes to emergency preparedness?
Don't just do it because somebody on the internet told you to do it. Go to somebody, go to a doctor, to a paramedic, go to the fire station. You can actually sometimes go to the fire station where you live, bring 3 or 4 cakes, cost you $10, and say, like, here, guys, thank you for your service. Can you help me? I want to do an emergency kit for traveling to, I don't know, Norway or something, or to Rome or something. What do you think? Bingo. You have somebody who's a professional with experience, which helps you. He gets a piece of cake and he feels happy because you thought of him, and you get the best advice. I think that one big advice is talk to somebody professional. He flew back from the Philippines, and it's a 16-hour flight, a long-ass flight. 2 of us got luckily bumped up to business class because the plane was very empty. And one guy, Big Chris, in premium economy. And at a certain point, I got up from my seat because I was just bored, and I walked around and I saw about 10 seats behind me, a guy getting up and then falling flat on his face forward. Bam. A big guy, right? So I ran over there. A lot of people saw that because he actually fell on somebody else's seat, and he was big. So I dragged him back, dragged him on the ground, and he was breathing very, very flat, right? Immediately there was a doctor there, an old doctor, probably in his 70s, and he yelled out loud, I'm a doctor, he's dead, we need to do CPR. And he ripped his chest open and tried to do CPR. I realized the guy is not dead. So doing CPR on him would probably kill him then. So he had a cramp because his fingers were cramped. So I called my colleague, Bobby, also a paramedic, and we took care of the situation. 3 doctors on the plane, 5 nurses from the Philippines on the plane. We delegated what to do. The doctor, that one older doctor, was still screaming that he's a doctor and the guy is dead and we need to do CPR. We really tried to push that guy away in a nice way, but at a certain point, you just have to push that person because that guy can actually kill someone. Situation was that we had nurses. We gave them the emergency kit from the flight deck, which includes a blood pressure cuff and a stethoscope. We had our pulse oxygenator and all those things with us. And we told the nurse, can you check all the vitals? So all the circulation parts, blood pressure, heart rate, oxygen saturation and everything. And she said, yeah, blood pressure is 120/80 and he has a 70 pulse, which is very unlikely in that situation. But in that situation, we didn't have time to check it on our own, right? Then we helped him. We gave him oral medication, which we had with us. We gave him also medication which we had from the flight emergency kit. And then another doctor came and he tipped on the back of our shoulders and said, hey, I'm Dr. So-and-so from Los Angeles. I see you guys are pros. I am in the back. Call me if you need something. That is perfect. That's a perfect procedure because he knew that we were already doing our job. Later on, we found out that those 2 nurses had no idea what they were doing because when we then tried later on to take the blood pressure, we realized that the blood pressure cuff was actually broken. So that lady was so in stress, and when I called her several times, what's the blood pressure? She just basically lied, 120/80. Because of all that stress. The other doctor tried to resuscitate a person who is unconscious but breathing. It is also a very bad thing, right? So you have situations where you do not get the perfect first aid. That guy was very lucky that we were there. We had then the first position parking in LAX, and the ambulance came in, and we gave them officially to the ambulance paramedics, and we told them what happened, blah, 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 and everything was fine. Good. What if we from Alpha 8 would have not been there? Either that old guy would have resuscitated him until he's really dead, or the nurse would have taken 100 times some kind of blood pressure and nothing would have happened, and that guy would have bit his tongue off or probably then suffocated because he didn't have any air because his airway was clogged.
In that regard, you had spoken about people reaching out to you, reaching out to the Alpha Aid team if they're interested in learning these skills or even having a checklist or things like that. How can listeners get involved with Alpha Aid to improve their own preparedness at home, in the workplace, even in their cars? What's the best way to get in contact with the organization?
Go to the website and fill out one of those forms and email us, and then we reach out. I think there's even a phone number there, so I think it's very easy to get in contact. alphaaid.org.